Hello, everyone. This is JT Keating, the Vice President of Product Strategy here at Zimperium. And welcome to our first webinar of the year. As you guys know, we're very partial to having quick-hitting, informative, we hope, webinars. And hopefully this one will fit into that mix as well. Standard stuff. I'll run through it. I'm going to probably try to keep it to about 20 minutes because I know everyone's super busy, especially at the beginning of the year. And thank you again for joining us for this. If you have any questions at all, please use the Q&A section. We have deactivated the chat capability because we keep having trouble with it. So even if you have technical difficulties or anything on those lines, please use the Q&A section. As always, we will have an archived version of this up on our site within a day or so. And if anybody's interested in the slides, we can certainly make that available as well. So with that, what I'm going to do is I spend a lot of time chatting with various different folks here, with the folks at Z Labs, with our customer success folks, et cetera. As you guys probably know, Zimperium have tens of millions of endpoints around the world with thousands of customers. So we have lots of insights to be able to bring to this sort of stuff. I didn't want to dive too deep into nuances and the like, so I wanted to kind of keep it focused and hopefully forest more than trees, but obviously always willing to dive a little bit deeper if anybody wants. So these are the top 5 things that boiled up to me, the things that if you were sitting in what is a relatively new position for some folks of mobile security. We've had mobile people, we've had security people, but a mobile security strategy and role is something that is really now kind of coming to fruition. If somebody is looking at mobile security from an enterprise standpoint, which is what Zimperium does, we focus on the enterprise. What are the top 5 things you need to know? Well, before we even dive into the top 5, I thought about making this one of the top 5, but I said, you know what, nah, it's going to be a freebie. So technically, I guess you're going to get 6. But here's the freebie. You're going to be attacked. And the reason we know that is 100% of our enterprise customers have detected mobile threats. So the simple fact is, it's kind of like, the old, I've been doing security for 20 years. The old joke that everybody always said was, there's only 2 different companies. Those that know they've breached and those that have been breached and just don't know it yet. That's the way it is in mobile right now. The guys that actually have instrumentation, have visibility, like our customers, are detecting threats all the time. The people that don't have instrumentation are still being attacked. They just don't know it yet, or they don't know which devices yet. And obviously, that's one of the main things that we talk about. So there's your freebie. That's not one of the 5, but just know you're going to get attacked. So you're really going to have to do something. The question is going to be a matter of prioritization and things on those lines. So now that the freebie is over, what are the top 5 things you need to know about mobile security? Well, here's number 1. Number 1, mobile is just another endpoint. This might sound like a BFO, a blinding flash of the obvious, but in a lot of organizations, they're just catching up to this concept. They're just catching up to the fact that an endpoint is an endpoint is an endpoint. If you have patient data sitting on a tablet, it has no difference than if you have patient data sitting on a laptop in terms of the importance and the need and the urgency to be able to protect it. Same thing with financial data. Same thing with client data if you're a consultant or a legal firm. Same thing with schematics to the grid if you're a utility. One of the main things people need to know about mobile security in 2019 is the attitude is mobile is just an endpoint. And by attitude, I mean also the regulators. All the regulators are starting to catch on to this, and they're going to actually force this attitude. Again, going back to my very first example, if I've got patient data sitting on a laptop, there is 0 logical reason that I don't have to apply the exact same HIPAA standards to protecting that. I need to make sure that there's anti-malware. I need to make sure that it's updated on a regular basis. I need to make sure it's encrypted. I need to make sure, all of those things still apply. And it doesn't matter at all if it's mobile. So number 1 thing you need to know about mobile security in 2019 is it's an endpoint. And anything you would do to secure a regular endpoint, you need to do to secure these endpoints. Number two, related to that point that we just made, we said mobile and security are relatively new categories, relatively, brand new category. There are two different groups that are directly involved with this. Now, that's happened on traditional endpoints and things as well, but it's becoming very pronounced here. There are security people that need to deal with it. Like I said, an endpoint's an endpoint. I need all this information to come in to existing systems that I've got. I need to be able to make this a part of my overall incident response, my overall instrumentation and visibility from a security side. Then you've got the mobile IT professionals. Historically, up until the beginning part of 2018, the only people really dealing with mobile were the mobile IT professionals. They were the ones who had implemented EMM solutions. They're the ones who had implemented mobile device management. They were the ones basically managing these mobile devices as best they could, or managing the access that some of these devices were having. So both security and mobility are involved, but in 2019, the trend that started in 2018 will absolutely come to pass, and we've seen this in every one of our customers. Security is now owning the majority of these projects. So if you are a security team, as more and more threats are coming out, as I mentioned at the onset, that everybody is being attacked, and there's all these high visibility things that are coming out, security guys are going to be tasked with solving the problem. As a general rule, a lot of the mobility teams don't have the security expertise. They understand, things like, is this thing jailbroken, which basically is usually in our terminology, there's compromises and there's jailbreaks. The jailbreak is something a user does to be able to get access to third-party app stores. Jailbreaking a phone is very easy to detect. So traditional mobility, those guys have done that. But there's this whole other wave of things we're going to be talking about, which are security actual threats that it requires a security guy's mindset to deal with. And so what we've seen is, as the threat becomes more and more pronounced, or more and more visible, because like we said, everybody's being attacked, it's just those people have visibility. The security guys are the ones now taking hold of this. So what that does is it actually says, hey, security guys, one of the main things you're going to have to learn is what's different in mobile. The mobility guys are trying to catch up to some of the security stuff, but that is a whole different ball of wax. When you're dealing with advanced persistent threats and you're dealing with all these different potential areas of compromise, and oh, by the way, this device is outside of your network. So the mobility guys, it's kind of with the security guys, minimally, you need to understand that on mobile, there are some fundamental differences. And so as you become the owners of this, here are some things you need to know. One, the single biggest risk in a company has always been a carbon-based life form. It's always been a human being. We've always wondered, we've always worried, we've always panicked about our users doing things that are not always so bright from a security standpoint. By the way, including our admins, but we'll put that aside for a minute. But now in mobile, that user is the admin of this device. There is no such thing as a centralized patch management system. There is no such thing as, by the way, these guys decide to spend 80% of their time outside of your corporate network, and they decide what networks they're going to connect onto, right? They decide what emails are going to open, everything else. They decide what apps they're going to install because they are, in fact, the admin. So one thing's different on mobile is users the admin. Second thing is the operating system is locked down. Since the operating system is locked down, which sounds really great in principle, and it is pretty great in principle, that also means security solutions have to be architected differently. And then the third main thing is apps are all in containers. So apps cannot play with other apps, which again is very great in concept. But what it says is you need to realize there's going to be a different attack vector, a different way, a kill chain that comes in that you need to address. So security guys, congratulations, you own the majority of all the projects going forward. And that's also going to lead to a critical piece, which is you need solutions that actually understand that. You need solutions that create as detailed a forensics as you need in order to feed your IR approaches and the like. And you need to be able to put it into your existing solutions. For instance, if you have Splunk, we have a Splunk app here at Zimperium. If you're using McAfee EPO, you need to do that, ArcSight, whatever the case may be. It can't be something that's off in its own little vacuum. If an endpoint is an endpoint is an endpoint, then you need to make sure that each endpoint is delivering data in with all the other endpoints to be able to have a complete picture. Did something happen with a person on a mobile device that opened an email that led to bang, 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 bang? You need to be able to know all that stuff and provide all those integrations, so it's going to be pretty critical. Number 3, so number 1, endpoint's an endpoint and endpoint. Number 2, congratulations, security guys. You now own mobile security in the vast majority of cases. So let's actually talk a little bit about what you need to fight against. Simple fact is, and we've seen this, like I told you, we have tens of millions of endpoints, we have billions of data points, we track this stuff all of the time. As I mentioned, Zimperium was built from the very beginning to protect enterprises against targeted attacks. We weren't designed to protect consumers against malicious apps, which are in little buckets, they're in little containers. We said, how are you going to stop? What is the main way of attacking enterprises, and how do you prevent that from occurring? Well, here's the 4 major buckets of attacks. Malicious apps are mostly fraud because they're in their own buckets. They can be a delivery mechanism, but it's not an efficient and a wise mechanism targeting you. So if I'm targeting you, I'm not going to put an app in the App Store and hope one of your employees downloads it. That's not smart. If I'm trying to go out and create ad fraud, I'll put in a malicious app. Perfect. Now, if I'm going after a bank with something like BankBot and stuff, I'm going after their mobile banking customers, which I'll get to in a minute, sure, I can do that. But as far as protecting employees and the like, it's just not good because they're in containers. So then you got phishing, which also is untargeted, also designed to be fraud. They're up on the spectrum a little bit because the minute you open a web page, something can be processed by your phone and you can elevate privileges pretty easily, easier than an app, to be honest. So with that, they're there, and we're going to talk about phishing again. But the primary way of targeting an enterprise has always been from a mobile standpoint, and we knew this from the beginning. If I'm targeting XYZ company, I'm going to set up a fake Wi-Fi network, a rogue access point to a man-in-the-middle attack in a coffee shop or someplace right by XYZ's headquarters. I'm going to wait until I find somebody from XYZ. They're going to connect to my network because mobile devices connect to pretty much any network they think is one they've already been connected to. I'm going to compromise that device. I'm going to elevate privileges and therefore be able to look across all the different containers and be able to completely own that device and frankly have more capabilities on that device than a user does. Basically root access. We've got demos that we can show. We've got videos if anybody's interested in looking at those. So the primary objective in order to be persistent is to compromise the device. The primary way of doing that is the network. Our data shows that 90% of the targeted attacks start that way. We did an entire series of webinars. You can go back and look at them last year if you're interested, on individual vertical markets. We did one on legal. We did it on financial services firms. We did it on banking. We did it on healthcare. We did it on utilities. We did, a major city. 90% of the attacks started with a network-based attack because it is a very efficient way of being able to do it. So you need to know that. And part of the reason you need to know it is you obviously need to be able to fight against it. The other thing it's doing is it is continuing a trend that we started, which is you need on-device protection. If in 90% of the cases, the bad guy controls the network, you need to make sure that you can defend yourself even when they control the network. If you have a cloud-based service, the first thing the bad guy does is cut off your access to that service. So you need to have on-device protection. It is a critical component as you're looking at these new systems, especially the security guys. Because security guys, again, you own this now, right? You're being attacked, you own it. You need to create a solution that's actually going to be effective against this. It needs to be something that can survive when the primary attack vector, which it is occurring and has for years, being the network attack, the bad guy owns the network. So you need to know that fact, and then you need to decide what is your strategy for competing against it. While we're on the line of different threats, so again, number one, endpoint's an endpoint. Number two, security, you own it. Number three, network attack is the primary way to target somebody. That's not to say that phishing, which is the major issue that we've faced, and again, it's a human being involved in the mix, is not an issue here. Matter of fact, it's a major issue here. 90% of the breaches, according to Verizon, start with a phishing attack. Well, 2/3 of the emails are opened on mobile devices. We've even seen with our own data the fact that because of the form factor, because of just the way that people interact with their phones, they are actually significantly more likely to open a phishing email on a mobile device than they are on their laptop. They're off doing stuff, they're busy, it's a small screen, it's hard to see the difference, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You must be looking for solutions that have mobile phishing protection, in addition to the usual protection you're putting in around your own email systems and everything like that. Because don't forget, another difference, if you will, and some could argue maybe it's not a huge difference, but I think it is, of mobile versus traditional endpoints, the user thinks it's their device. So they are opening their personal email just as often as they're opening their corporate email. In that particular case, if I open a personal email that's a phish, not only might I give up credentials, but I hit that website. If that website is being processed by that mobile browser, it could deliver an exploit that compromises the device that now the company has to deal with. So look for phishing to continue to be a major issue and try and figure out what solutions you're going to put in place to combat it. Now, shifting gears just a little bit, the first four are very, very consistent and all really talking about protecting your employees. These are mobile threats against your corporation. But there's a significant chunk of you that, whether it's for employees, because you're trying to get around some of the issues where there's maybe some pushback against EMM because of privacy issues by the employees, or if it's to your actual customers and consumers, you're creating mobile apps. And those mobile apps are being put out into the world. If you're producing mobile apps, you definitely need to know about number 5, because number 5 is a change, is a nuance, is something new in this realm that you might not know about, or your development teams might not know about. Because as we know, mobile apps are basically Legos. There's a bunch of Legos, you put them together, and voila, you've got an app. Those Legos are libraries that the developers who are usually under the gun, don't have enough time, they will say, hey, look, I need access to the camera. Well, let's go pull that library, click, throw that Lego in. What they don't know is what's actually in that Lego, right? And so as they're building these apps, there's certain things that they need to kind of keep in mind. To give you an idea of how important what we're talking about, this is a financial services example, but this is some really, really interesting data from RSA. If you look at the one on the left, that's the transaction distribution by channel. So 56% of the volume is coming from a mobile browser or a mobile app. So that's actually a number of transactions. You can see it just continuing to increase and increase and increase as time goes across. The one with the orange circle or rectangle around it on the right, that's fraud. So the reported fraud, over 70% of online, in quotes, fraud is from mobile. So it's a huge issue right now. And so a lot of institutions have said, okay, look, we get that. And so what we're going to do is we're going to invest in technologies that are largely server side out in order to solve this problem. So what companies have done is they've protected themselves against everything except the user device itself. So what institutions have done, you guys have probably done this yourself because it's good practice. You lock down your back office systems, you check your APIs, you of course are going to use encryption, SSL, et cetera, across the network. If you're smart and good and already in a DevSecOps environment, you're doing as much as you can for your app. You're doing app hardening, app shielding, you're doing vulnerability testing on your app. The simple fact is, as we were going back and talking about this, one of the principles that's been around for security for as long as security's been around, and it still applies in mobile, low man wins. And like we said, especially with containerized apps, the bad guy's number one objective is to compromise the device, to actually take over the device. Well, if they've taken over the device, even if your app is perfectly pristine, they can still conduct fraud through it. If they've taken over the Wi-Fi network, which we said, of course, is the beginning of most of the targeted attacks, they can still mess around and do some things in terms of injections and the like. So the trend for 2019 is, for those guys who have done the great hygiene on the first parts, there now are solutions to actually help you, as a part of your mobile app, protect against that ugliness of the consumer and or employee device that you don't have any control over. So that's a major trend that we've seen. We've got customers that deployed it to tens of millions of devices, one of which said in the first 30 days, we provided visibility to potentially $1 billion worth of online fraud. So it's a real issue that we're facing. Just a quick word about Zimperium, only just to kind of give you a little bit of a feel for what it is that we do and how we fit in, and then I'm going to wrap this up. We have one engine, just like BMW is an engine company, not a car company, right? It creates tons of engines and puts it in a whole bunch of different things. We have one engine, which is a machine learning based engine that is designed to be trained up in the lab and to be able to detect even unknown, based on their behavior, threats on the mobile device, even when the network is compromised. So we do 100% of our detection on device, even though it's trained up in the lab. So train it in the lab, detect on device, against the 4 major attack vectors that we've been talking about. We put that out in one of 2 ways. ZIPS stands for Z Intrusion Prevention System. If you're trying to protect your devices that you own or your employee devices, this is like next generation antivirus for mobile. It detects device network phishing, app attacks on device 100% of the time. So that's if you're protecting the device, the data, the access of that device. If, however, you have a mobile app and you want to install our software development kit called ZApp for in-app protection, we have a very small, matter of fact, anybody who wants, you can go to the site right now and you can download it and start playing with it for free. It's literally that quick, that small, to provide all that same detection, but as a part of your app. So in that case, you can actually determine, is this device compromised? Is this device on a bad Wi-Fi network? Are there malicious apps sitting on the device? And make decisions about what you're going to do. Potentially raise the fraud score. Potentially say you need to contact customer support to reset your password, whatever. It's the same engine, just being deployed out in 1 of 2 ways. And then that engine feeds into our console. Because we're doing 100% of our detection on device, you can put our console in any cloud you want. I mentioned earlier that you need to lock into and tie into the workflow from a security standpoint, which you see down in the lower right. You also need to tie into the workflow of your company. If you guys are all Google Cloud, okay, that's fine, put it there, right? Behind our Z console is a capability called Z3A. I talked about the fact that mobile apps are basically Legos that you click together, and developers put them together real quickly. Z3A stands for Advanced App Analysis. We can look at any app that you're either producing or any apps that are in your employees, on your employees' phones in your environment, and tell you not only are they malicious, we could also tell you if they have security or privacy risks inherent in them. So they might not be malicious, but they still might be, I don't know, sending traffic to a foreign country that you don't know anything about. So you can decide what you're going to do with that. And then for ZIPS, when you're protecting your employee device, we tie in with the largest set of EMM or UEM, now they're being called, providers. We can also do multiple UEMs in a single console. We're the only ones who can do that. And in case of Mobile Iron customers, we've actually taken ZApp and installed it directly in the Mobile Iron agent. In that case, it does 100% of the detection, remediation, everything on device without having to leave the device at all. And there's 100% instant customer rollout because there's no secondary rollout. So it's pretty cool. So to wrap up, and I'll see what kind of questions we've got, and I think I'm still doing pretty good. Yeah, pretty good. Number one, mobile's an endpoint, and if you don't believe it, the regulators will make sure that you do. Two, congratulations, security guys. You now own mobile security. Three, the majority of these attacks have and will continue to begin with a network attack. You need to account for that. Four, do not pass on mobile phishing. It is critical in terms of protection. And then five, you need to protect your apps against the devices that are being put on, not just network attacks like cellular with SSL or attacks against your own backend servers. So with that, I will just leave this up and see if anybody has any questions. And then if not, then I will wrap this up and thank you guys. Okay, I don't see any Q&A. If you do, even after the fact, have any questions, I am jt.keating, Keating, at zimperium.com. Feel free to shoot me an email, and myself or somebody else on our team will respond back with that. So with that, I would like to thank everybody for your time. Have a great 2019, and hopefully this was helpful.